Hi, and welcome to another episode of About the Authors TV. I'm your host, Jake Brown. National Public Radio's All Things Considered has remarked of Lucy Jane Bledsoe's writing that she can make you taste the particular air at the top of a mountain pass in summer. And Passport magazine has raved of her work, using the ice cave as an example, that it's an exhilarating read. There's an aching beauty to her tales of travel, and she's carved out a specialty taking her readers on trips to the Arctic, with book lists spotlighting tracks in the snow because of Bledsoe's thorough outdoor knowledge, the basis of the story, and because for a nice change, the adventure features girls. Two specialties that have gone hand in hand throughout her storytelling career. Her talents were on full display in the Bang Symphony, where bookmarks admired the way her story captures the southern continent, blend of mystery, menace, and majesty with ravishing immediacy. Bledsoe's narratives of the women's stint in polar isolation, confronting the emotional puzzles of their lives, is riveting in itself. But the subplots, most centrally Rosie's self-exile from her family and Michaela's childhood in the 1960s commune, add sublime texture to this crystalline novel. She's been equally celebrated in this arena for This Wild Silence, The Antarctic Scoop, and How to Survive the Antarctic. Boldness running throughout her entire catalog, with Sweat Stories and released over 25 years ago, Publishers Weekly observed that Bledsoe shows herself to be a smart and savvy writer. In this tender work, she perfectly evokes the healing power of the outdoors. While the Library Journal found within the pages of Working Parts that refers to a mechanic's ordered universe, a self-assured lesbian sense of women's bodies and reading, which like cycling opens up new worlds. In addition to its appeal as fiction, this book is important reading for anyone interested in adult literacy and recommended for all collections. While she continued to gain new fans with a blend of adult and YA titles, The Big Bike Race and Biting the Apple, where Curve magazine was mesmerized by the way each sentence is meticulously crafted and reads like mini works of art in and of themselves. The story and style all come together brilliantly. A Thin Bright Line would be selected as a Best General Interest book by public library reviewers, and the New York Times Book Review concluded that it triumphs as an intimate and humane circumstances, while The Evolution of Love inspired Miss Magazine's reviewer that while reading Lucy Jane Bledsoe's new novel, I remembered what it means to fall in love with a novel, to race through its pages, then slow down as I see the climax coming, to set a book down to spend more time with the characters in my own imagination, to delay the inevitable ending as the stack of pages left dwindles in my hands. Fabulous feminist fiction. The short story collection Lava Falls would make The Advocate's Best of 2019 book list, and the Toronto Star declared it a riveting new collection with fully realized characters and stories that will stick to your ribs. Most recently, she's given fans Running Wild, Tell the Rest, and No Stopping Us Now, which forward reviews crowned a timeless and triumphant story of courage and an excellent historical novel. She's won 2 National Science Foundation Artists and Writers Fellowships, a California Arts Council Fellowship, a Yaddo Fellowship, an American Library Association Stonewall Award, the Arts and Letters Fiction Prize, the Saturday Evening Post Fiction Award, the Sherwood Anderson Prize for Fiction, 2 Pushcart nominations, and the Devil's Kitchen Fiction Award. And she joins us today to talk all about her 4 decades in literature. Lucy, welcome to the show.
Hey Jake, how are you?
The outdoors would play prominently into your writing to come, and we understand you grew up in a family who shared a great love for camping. Did you first find yourself developing a love of storytelling, hearing them around the campfire as a kid?
Well, I love that you say storytelling because that's the word I use a lot too. I feel like culturally, as human beings, that's the thing that is the neatest thing about us, just that we are storytellers. And I often fantasize about, people millions of millennia ago, or well, however many we were there, sitting around campfires telling stories. And it's just the way, we explain ourselves to ourselves and to each other. So to me, that's the most important aspect of writing. It sounds kind of obvious, but for some people, the actual, sentence structure is the more important part. I just really am conscious and like to think a lot about the stories that we choose to tell. I grew up in a family that they're big readers. My dad was obsessed with Shakespeare and Dickens, but by the time I was born, he was mainly reading gigantic historical tomes, nonfiction. But my mom read a lot of contemporary fiction, and we actually were brought up, at least my earliest years, without TV. I was in a family of 7, and we would sit around in the evening and be expected to read. So I definitely came by it, honestly. I also had, my dad was from a farm in Arkansas, and my Arkansas grandmother come to visit. And I mean, talk about a storyteller. I mean, she would just she lived in this tiny town outside their farm, and the stuff that happened, I mean, it's just amazing. I guess in a small town like that, you hear about it, but I remember her telling about a story about a little girl who was my age, who lived next door, who was tied to a tree. And my grandmother always say, with a rope as big around as my wrist. That woman grew up to be the editor of the town paper. And so just like, it goes on and on. So I definitely come from a storytelling tradition.
Why was she tied to a tree?
That was just what her mom did for childcare. I know. I found it shocking and scary and fascinating. And my grandmother did not approve at all. That was only one story about that family.
So it sounds like you already knew you wanted to be a writer by then.
That's all I ever wanted to be. And I don't know how I knew that, except that it was something respected in my family. I mean, by the time I got to be in college and was announcing I really was going to do that, I didn't have as much familiar support. They were like, no, you have to support yourself. Don't do this. But it's just all I ever wanted to be. I was trying to write quote unquote books since I was very, very young.
It's safe to say basketball will become something of a theme throughout your writing career as well. Rooting way back to your effort to help advocate for the right for women to play high school basketball in the Portland public school system back in the mid-1970s under Title IX, recently chronicled in No Stopping Us Now, where the School Library Journal highlighted this as an autobiographical novel with richly developed, bold, courageous characters and raw emotion. Definitely captures the period of transition, not just for Louisa, but for women's rights in the 1970s. Please reflect back on how art imitated life and your personal version of this very inspiring story in time.
I loved, and I still love, basketball. My brothers played, they coached me. We all played as a family a lot. So I love the sport. My YA novel, No Stopping Us Now, that came out last year, is about my effort in the mid-70s to get Title IX implemented in the state of Oregon so I could play on a team. We didn't even have girls basketball teams all the way through my school until my senior year in Oregon. And it was a little different around the country. So some places actually did have girls basketball early. So, I mean, it's funny because I write about basketball a lot. I love it. But, I was, even back then when you didn't even have to be good as a girl to play, because I was a bench sitter. So I love teams. I love the collective community of teams, but I wasn't horrible. I think I was what they call the sixth man, the sixth person coming off the bench. But yeah, I think this is the book I've been the longest in writing. I've been trying to tell this story probably since it happened when I was a kid and did that in the 70s. But I haven't been able to figure out how to tell the story. I mean, I've literally written it. I guess part of my problem is I thought since it is a true story, I should tell it as nonfiction. But the problem of writing a novel or a nonfiction book about some activism like that is, it's basically a string of meetings. I mean, it's hard to hang a plot on that would be engaging. Besides, I'm just not a nonfiction writer. I wrote it as a screenplay. I wrote it as a stage play. After I wrote the screenplay, as much as I'd love it to be a movie, I realized I did a little research. I just can't go into that world. I'm a novelist. I can't do it. I can't do it. But, that evolution finally, okay, now it's a screenplay. I thought, aha, I should write this as a YA novel, because what I really cared about is showing this teenage girl myself who wanted this thing, did this political work to make it happen, and connect with young people today who are trying to make change, because they are doing that in such wonderful ways. And so that was really my hope with this book. I said, well, let's write it for YA, and let's write it as a novel so I can really dive into the emotional life of kids, because basically that's what makes things interesting for me, is when you tell an emotional story and the connection of the girls on this team with each other and with their friends and with loves outside of the team. So yeah, I finally figured out I wanted to write it as a YA novel, and that it was okay to fictionalize it, because I wanted to, I combined a couple years, like the following year in my life, I took some experiences and dropped it into this so that I could tell a compelling story, not just sort of this one tiny thing I did.
From the standpoint of kids who have read this and then ask you, was this really something that wasn't allowed? What is it? So
50 years ago, Title IX passed 50 years ago. Yeah.
So is that unbelievable to them? Do they think that's part of the fiction?
Yes, I know it is a little bit unbelievable to them. I think young people today they're getting back their activism, because the way the world is right now and what they're seeing. But yeah, some of them just kind of can't even believe that we didn't have basketball teams back then. I mean, yeah, you look at the WNBA now, it's like, what? But they are very engaged with it and very interested about it. I did a lot of events where I did conversations with 16 and 17-year-olds. So the two of us would be talking about it, how we see the world, how we see change in activism. And I really like bridging that gap with my fiction, because, we all need to talk among the generations. It's really important to me. I know a lot of older people just, it's such a cliche, kids these days. I love listening to what kids these days are doing and saying, and I learn a lot from them. And yeah, that's just essential to me, to know what young people are doing and stay in touch. I was not, luckily, subjected to conversion therapy. But it is still ongoing. It's been outlawed in a number of states, but it's not outlawed everywhere. And even where it's not outlawed, or even where it is outlawed, that practice is happening. I talked to lots of young people, lots of queer young people who you'd think now it's all cool, everybody's cool, but it's not. It's almost harder to come out now than it was for me in the 70s, because we had this whole underground. I was invited by the vice principal in my high school to do an event in the Portland Auditorium with Gloria Steinem, so this was 1973, I think, about. And so I did it. I was the youth representative on stage. And I learned about Title IX, which had just been passed the year before. And I realized that, oh my gosh, I legally have a right to have a basketball team, which is what I wanted. So I didn't do it by myself. Some other folks at that event organized, but again, they sort of set me up as the youth rep. And I went and spoke to the school board. I spoke to the Oregon legislature, and we did this whole process and eventually won a basketball league by the very next year, my senior year.
So you won. Did you actually get to play after that?
I got to play. And the really fun thing of that story, this is kind of a spoiler for people who might want to read No Stopping Us Now, but we went on and won the state tournament that year. So it was really, really fun.
You then attended Williams College and University of California, Berkeley at the height of activism in the 1970s among college students. Do you feel like the activism that weaves its way through your work as a signature was solidified back then? And who do you count as any academic voices from that era who further helped you in finding yours as an author?
The 1970s were just an incredible time to come of age. So much was happening. I mean, the other side of that is right now, I know so many of us who came of age in the 70s thought so much was changing, and we're having this sort of bad moment right now politically in terms of change. But so that's hard, because we thought we were really going somewhere, and we were. But it was, it was a very formative time. I loved, it's funny, talking about professors and teachers. I would say the teacher who I credit the most was a high school teacher. Not a college professor. Mr. Murray in high school, oh my gosh, he was just amazing. He taught literature and also a philosophy class. And he was very soft-spoken and had this way of templing his fingers all the time and nodding. And anytime any student said something, he acted as if he had said something brilliant. And at that age, you believed him, it's like, and the confidence that he gave me in my voice and that I could be a writer really was everything to me. It was really just everything. So yeah, and then I went on from high school and him to Williams College, and kind of a cool thing happened there. When I took the SATs, I got confused and didn't turn the pages at the right time. And so when the person at the front of the room said, now turn, anyway, she accused me of cheating. She said, she came and yanked the test out of my place and said, you can't go. It was a whole horrifying thing. So I had a very low SAT score, and I retook it later and had a nice high one, but I got into Williams on that first SAT score. I'm saying this whole story because I later learned that the admissions director there looked at this SAT score and said, oh my God, you look at her essay, this girl can write, what the heck is going on with this SAT score? So thankfully there was someone there actually looking at that stuff, but also it was, again, another big boost for me to have that admissions director say that I could really write. So
every author experiences their own version of that same sensational moment when they first read their name on the cover of their book. What was yours as you began to see your writing career graduate into those new dimensions?
it was absolutely amazing. It was just to be able to write a book that was something that I wanted to talk about and put into the world, just felt fabulous. And to be able to write a novel about literacy, which, and about young adults who were learning to read for the first time, and yet as brilliant and wonderful and smart as other adults, and to sort of shine a light on that issue. I love that. But also just to be able to tell a story that people appreciated and to see it reviewed. My curriculum, didn't get reviewed, at least not, in the Chronicle or the, big newspapers. So that was really exciting.
Readers walk into the wild with Aaron and Tiffany in Tracks in the Snow, where Booklist predicted that many libraries will want this because of Bledsoe's thorough outdoor knowledge, the basis of the story, and because, for a nice change, the adventure features girls. Did this book time with your own personal expansion into new frontiers up in snow country?
I mentioned my family did a lot of wilderness exploration. We didn't do anything in the snow. So I wasn't trained to ski, but I was obsessed since an early age with the whole idea of survival. I used to, we'd have all our whole family of 7 in the station wagon. We'd be driving to church, and I'd be looking at the parks in Portland on either side of the road thinking, how could I live there if I needed to? It was just something I was always obsessed with. I can't tell you why exactly, but it's like, what if I need, I'm still obsessed with it. I'm obsessed with the apocalypse, and, what if I need to suddenly survive on my own, how can I do it? So it started from a place there. But I started going from backpacking in the summer to taking overnight ski trips in the winter and the Sierra. And I just loved it. I mean, you could go places like Yosemite where it's pretty much too crowded for me to be in the summer, but in the wintertime, you have the place all to yourself, and it's just beautiful. And so I started doing that kind of exploration, and it led to thinking about this story of this little girl who goes out and saves her babysitter.
Trekking deeper into this talent of yours for bringing readers into the outdoors on the page, NPR's All Things Considered once mused that Bledsoe can make you taste the particular air at the top of a mountain pass in summer, while Passport magazine was moved to highlight that there's an aching beauty to her tales of travel, and throughout the pages of the Antarctic Scoop and How to Survive the Antarctic as examples. Could you describe a bit about what was creatively pulling your passion for this backdrop more centrally into the heart of these works and others to follow?
It means a lot to me. And again, it goes back to my family. We did a lot of outdoor stuff from very, very early on. We did backpacking when I was still being carried in one of the packs. And so, and I guess it goes back to me. You get to this very simple place of who you are as a human. Back to that, the people sitting around the fire millions of years ago telling stories. When you're out in the wilderness, you really realize you're just another creature out there with the rest of the creatures. And I feel like there's a lot of knowledge there that's very useful to me as a writer. I also get back to a place of sort of all that junk and anxiety of people falls away, and I realize who I am and what I want to say. So it's where I go when I need that kind of restoration. I think for me, especially, it's funny, I used to joke that I've never written a book without someone in a tent in it, and that hasn't been true the last few tents. So I think I've transitioned some with my deep interest being less about individuals in wilderness and more about being individuals in community. But that said, this idea that people, I like to take my characters and stress them, and then see what humanity comes out. And what better way to stress a person than physically? So, the environment, I'm really, really interested in a human relationship to our environment. So what does it mean to be in a place that seems hostile, but where the character actually learns how to work in it? So whether that's, sleeping in a snow cave or climbing a mountain, those are the kinds of settings that I was really interested in for a long time. I think a lot of it is process and remembering my feeling the first time in these settings and what that was like and what I thought the challenges were and what I thought the opportunities were. So when I send a character, I think you do have to know the setting. So I was lucky to go to Antarctica several times. I've been to the Arctic many more times than I've been to the Antarctic, and how it felt to go into those settings and what I wanted out of that setting. And then there is creativity and imagination. In the Antarctic Scoop, I send that little girl on quite a wild little journey. And that's a young adult novel.
The Big Bang Symphony will become one of your most popular adult novels, in a story where bookless rave that you skillfully orchestrate the lives of an intriguing set of characters gathered in an outpost in Antarctica. Bledsoe uses the locale's incredible beauty and high potential for drama, danger, and self-discovery for insights small and great as the women react to the sun's breathtaking glint on the ice, and conversely, to the power of an unmerciful environment that so quickly turns deadly. Please talk about how you use these circumstances to shape the story that follows for Rosie Moore, Michaela Wilbo, and Alice Nielsen. while stuck together up at McMurdo Station in the South Pole.
When I went to Antarctica, I mean, the high of seeing that extreme beauty, it was so amazing. And it just does so much for me in terms of happiness. My novel, The Big Bang Symphony, is the adult novel I wrote about Antarctica. And I took 3 women characters. One's a galley cook, one's a climate scientist, and one is a composer. And I went to Antarctica on an artists and writers fellowship, and she goes on that. So I take these 3 women, throw them in the Antarctic, and see what happens. So for me, part of it is the love of storytelling, is to take characters, throw them in a setting, and then see what happens. What I want to do is show the transformative quality of being in a setting like that. But the fun part was, I mean, oh my gosh, people told me, you're a writer, people will tell you anything if you ask them, and if you tell them you're a writer. So the stories I gathered, and the couple times that I was in Antarctica, I got to go to all 3 American bases. So McMurdo's got Palmer Station on the peninsula, and also the South Pole Station. I got to spend time at all of them. You ask a lot of questions, and people tell you stories. And I put a lot of those stories in the Big Bang Symphony. For instance, there's one, everybody, if you leave the base, you have to take a radio. And there was one story about a pair who went off to have an affair. They had their radios on. It literally is broadcast over the whole station, because so stuff like that I just had to put, in the book. The other thing that happens in Antarctica, I talked to the chaplain for a long time. And so he said, all he does is affair counseling, because people get in that setting and it just sort of strips you emotionally. And so many people have affairs when they go off to Antarctica to do, a several months thing. And more so than other places. It's just, there's something about the place. So all these stories I got to put in this novel, and there's so many amazing stories about what people do there. So it was really fun.
We look forward to bringing you Lucy Jane Bledsoe's full episode in an upcoming season on a streaming network. But for now, we're excited to talk with her about her latest releases. Now, you confront some very ugly reality and tell the rest. How to bring in these 2 estranged friends back home to deal with the past. Help take this new novel where the story needed to go.
I really started at a place of, I oddly majored in religious studies in college. I'm fascinated with how, and I think people don't talk enough about how religion is like rules the world. And I've been fascinated lately and enraged, frankly, how the Christian right is behaving. I mean, it's like, in my understanding of Christianity, it's about love and community, and the Christian right is all about hate. And how can they promote hate in the name of Christianity? I don't know, but they do it. And so I wanted to explore that, and I wanted to combat that. So I was not, luckily, subjected to conversion therapy. But it is still ongoing. It's been outlawed in a number of states, but it's not outlawed everywhere. And even where it's not outlawed, or even where it is outlawed, that practice is happening. I talked to lots of young people, lots of queer young people who you'd think now it's all cool, everybody's cool, but it's not. It's almost harder to come out now than it was for me in the 70s, because we had this whole underground, this whole little world, and you felt held by that, and it felt like a discovery. And now kids it's all supposed to be cool, but a lot of the hate is still there. And it's actually, the hate is more overt with the Christian right. So I wanted to take on the Christian right, frankly. So I wanted to do this thing I've talked about a lot, about showing how community and friendship can heal that trauma. So I very much don't appreciate and don't write trauma porn. So the novel doesn't dive into the horrors of conversion therapy. What it starts when these 2 characters are actually middle-aged or late 30s, early 40s, and how they have survived and what that survival means. And one is an accomplished poet, one is an accomplished basketball coach. I can't help going back to that basketball thing. One of their lives is sort of unraveling from that trauma, but it's how they get back together, their friendship, Ernest and Delia, and there's a 3rd character too, who's sort of a ghost character in the story, and how they have healed and gone forward through community and love, and through and I like to tell, I have several minister friends, and I like to tell them and tell the rest, don't stop reading, because there's actually a pastor character who is cool and progressive and promotes love in the name of her faith. So it's not just stereotypes. I try to get into how there are some Christians who actually use the religion for love and community. My new book, Tell the Rest, which I know we're going to talk about later, is about human rage. But the flip side of that is, and so when I was writing that book, I didn't really want to talk about rage. So I thought, well, what's the flip side of that? And I have a character in the book who studies what it means to be happy. And I'm mentioning this now because and so I did a lot of reading about happiness studies. And one of the main components of being happy is being in beautiful places. And so that's really true for me. Well, my most recent one is Tell the Rest. And that's coming out in 2 weeks. So I'm doing a lot of events for that. And sometimes people tell me I'm very prolific, and I guess I am, but I've just been doing it a heck of a lot of years. I write every day. I tell people, if you write 3 pages a day, you have a novel in a year. And then you spend 2 or 3 or 4 years rewriting it, because I do a lot of rewriting. All that said, I've sort of at the end of this, No Stopping Us Now came out last year. And it's not like sometimes people who aren't writers think that, No Stopping Us came out last year and Tell the Rest is coming out this year. I wrote Tell the Rest in there. No, both of them took years to write. And I, will write one, I'll set it aside for a while, I'll work on another. So when they come out is a little bit random compared to when I wrote them. So I'm saying all this to say that I have nothing on the horizon. So I hope people support Tell the Rest, because it's going to be, I am writing some stuff. I'm writing a new novel, but I don't even have a first draft I love yet. So it'll be a few years before I have another one.
When you do a book signing these days, do you tend to do a YA versus adult novel appearances separate, versus having to divide your mind between, say, every other person in line with a different kind of book?
No, I'm happy. I combined is fine. A lot of adults read my kids' books. A lot of adults read YA now. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, to your earlier point, I am incredibly pleased that I've gotten to keep writing, because it's hard to keep writing. And I think what I'm most happy about in my writing career is I've gotten to keep writing about what I want to write about. And that's really hard, because sometimes I want to write about something that's not like the it thing at the time, and finding a publisher and finding an audience and is hard. I mean, sometimes I tell students there's 2 approaches. You can figure out what you think will sell, or you can write the book you want to write. And I don't actually value one over the other. It's fine if someone wants to write a book that they think will sell. It's not what I do. What I enjoy is having these ideas that I really want to explore in these characters. So I am pleased that over the years I've managed to keep selling books.
Finally, teaching creative writing at the Master's Graduate Program at the University of San Francisco. Please make us your students for a moment. What do you teach that you successfully apply to your own craft that you share with viewers here?
I once heard Ernest Gaines, who's a wonderful novelist, say that there's 6 rules to becoming a good writer, and they're read, and write. And I very much believe in that school of study. I mean, I think it's great to go get an MFA and you make great connections. I think the danger is, especially if you're young when you go, you can be thrown off course. We all have very fragile egos, and if you want to develop your own unique voice, you have to be careful in those programs that you're not squashed. So I, do that, but also just read your brains out and write and keep writing. Like I say, if you write a page a day, you have 365 pages at the end of a year, so you can just keep going. The other thing I really think about reading is read very widely. I read across all kinds of cultural borders. Read all different kinds of people, different from yourself, young, old, all different skin colors, all different genders. Just read really widely. And I think that's the best way to develop your own voice and figure out what it is, how you want to be a part of that stream of storytelling.
Lucy, it's been great talking today. Thanks so much for taking time to be on About the Authors TV.
Great. Thank you so much, Jake.